right, everybody, welcome to the Otherppl Podcast, a weekly program featuring in-depth interviews with today's leading writers. I'm Brad Listi. I'm your host. I'm in Los Angeles. Thanks for being here. I appreciate it. Don't forget to hit the subscribe button wherever you listen. You can also subscribe on YouTube. Follow me on social media, Bluesky and Instagram, maybe TikTok, though it seems like TikTok might go away. I don't know what's going on. And it's obviously been a crazy few days here in Los Angeles. I would be remiss if I didn't mention the fires that have torn through multiple communities within the city and have been just awful to behold. Skies filled with smoke and pollution and God knows what. Entire communities just wiped out. Thousands of houses, thousands of families left homeless. And with just like the clothes on their backs. It's been wild. And 2025 so far, this year has been wild. I'm recording this and we're in January. We're not even halfway through January. There's already been a terrorist attack on Bourbon Street in New Orleans. Some crazy person driving a pickup truck at high speed down Bourbon Street at 3 o'clock in the morning. Some guy blew himself up in a Cybertruck outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. And now we have these fires. I've got to say, I expected 2025 to be a horror show. And, so far we're exceeding my expectations. I was joking with a friend because I have to find some kind of dark humor. Joking with a friend that I forgot how much I missed masking in fear. Putting on an N95 to walk the dog. And I've also been joking that I've been keeping an Excel spreadsheet. Keeping a list of everybody who has texted me to check in to see if I'm okay. Because, if you start to think about it, you're like, wow, I'm living in an urban inferno. In a disaster zone. If people that you think are your friends aren't checking in with you when this kind of thing is happening, maybe they don't really like you. It seems like a pretty good litmus test, doesn't it? I say this, and I should also mention that my own sister didn't reach out to me until today. So I guess it's complicated. Maybe people feel like you might be busy. They don't want to bother you with text messages while the world is burning. I don't know. But suffice it to say, it's been brutal. And, I just got to tell you how eerie it has been to be here and to see how quickly life can change, how quickly fires can spread when you have this confluence of environmental factors, this really dry land, all of this dried out vegetation, and then you have a spark, and then you have incredibly high winds. You have hurricane force winds, which really are the pivotal element. These fires would spread and would, cause a lot of damage with just fire and dry vegetation. But when you add 75 or 100 mile an hour winds, and that's what makes it so destructive. So, I'm doing all right. My house is good. My wife and kids are good. And my dog is good. One of the fires got a little bit close. It was a little bit touch and go, but it was a fire that started right around the time that the winds started to die down, which thank God they did, because the winds had been coming in out of the northeast, which, if I have my directions right, means that they were blowing in a southwesterly direction. And had we been getting southwesterly winds at 75 miles an hour when the fire near my house broke out, it's possible that there could have been real pandemonium. Real destruction in the LA basin. So, what can I tell you? It's been a week. And I'm excited to be back. It's been a week after we had a break. So we got the kids back in school for one day, and then these fires started. They've been out of school since. So they're getting another week of time away from school. It's just been chaos for so many people. I don't mean to complain. There are people who have it much worse, but it's been a week. I think it's probably been stressful for people in other parts of the country and other parts of the world just watching this. Not even having to be here. But suffice it to say, I'm happy to be back here talking with you in the new year and to share with you a conversation with today's guest, Zahid Rafiq. He is the author of a debut story collection called The World with Its Mouth Open, and it is available from Tin House. The World with Its Mouth Open was the official December 2024 pick of the Otherppl Book Club. That is my book club. For more on it and to sign up, just go to the show's official website, otherppl.com. I spoke with Zahid Rafiq in recent weeks, and I'm just now getting around to posting our conversation. The World with Its Mouth Open is a marvelous debut collection. It follows the inner lives of people in Kashmir in a political and social and psychological environment that is fractured from years of war. My conversation with Zahid Rafiq is coming up momentarily. A quick reminder before we get going about my weekly email newsletter. You can sign up for it over at Substack. I would love it if you did. Today's episode is brought to you by Harper Books, publisher of the novel The Capital of Dreams by Heather O'Neill. Heather O'Neill is the hugely acclaimed author, beloved by a bunch of literary lights, including Emily St. John Mandel, Kelly Link, and Mona Awad. The Capital of Dreams is a dark, dystopian fairy tale about an idyllic country ravaged by war and a girl torn between safety and loyalty. This is a stunning novel set in an imaginative world, yet one that is reflective of our own times. Heather O'Neill delivers a vivid, breathtaking, dark tale of life, death, and betrayal. One more time, the novel is called The Capital of Dreams by Heather O'Neill, available from Harper Books. Okay, so my guest, once again, is Zahid Rafiq. His debut story collection is called The World with Its Mouth Open. It is available from Tin House. Zahid Rafiq is a writer living in Srinagar, Kashmir. He was a journalist for several years before turning to fiction. The World with Its Mouth Open is his first book, and it is a stunner. So let's get to today's conversation. Here I am with Zahid Rafiq, and his new story collection, one more time, is called The World with Its Mouth Open.
Yeah, I grew up in Kashmir. I was born here, and I did my undergrad here. And after that, I joined journalism. At the same time, I went into a journalism program, and I was a journalist for a while. For many years, in between, I went to the US to study journalism at UC Berkeley, and yeah, then I came back and I was a journalist again. And so for like 8 to 10 years, I guess I was a journalist.
And now you've turned to fiction.
Yeah, it's been a while since I turned to fiction, and I always wanted to be a fiction writer. I always wanted to write fiction. But I guess when I came as a young person, I did not have it was not very, neither feasible nor possible. It was not a job. It was not journalism was the thing that was writing that paid money. So it was part of the rite of passage.
What kind of journalism did you do?
Mostly about politics, mostly about conflict, human rights violations, about. And then I was a newspaper reporter, so I would write 3 4 stories a day at times. But this was like a couple of years. So, but mostly conflict, mostly war, violence, mostly violence.
And in terms of your approach to writing fiction, is the journalism work that you did something that you look to and think of as good training for the fiction writing that you've done? Like, did it help you? I feel like I've talked to journalists over the years, and there's something about the discipline of it and how you can't really be too precious because you're on deadlines and you've got to get stories out. And so there's a kind of speed that you learn to write with that might
Yeah,
make like the process of writing fiction less uh, I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it's less difficult, but it certainly is something that I feel like journalists have the ability to do in a kind of like a workaday fashion just because they've been so accustomed to churning out
yeah.
pieces.
I don't think that is true for me. I'm very slow, very slow. I'm not fast at all, to be honest. I'd like few sentences, sometimes few passages, but I'm not very quick. In my journalism also, I was not the quickest. I was slow because I prefer to be slow. I am wired that way. That sometimes I think it takes a long time. Like in the writing might happen quickly, but there are these passages of time in between writing that take time, that are slow, where I'm thinking, wondering, pondering over the subject. And so I think it taught me some things, I'm sure. But I think more than anything, it was that I was a journalist for 10 years. It was the life I lived. And it is me. That is me between the age of 22, 23 to 33, 34 is the me who wrote journalism and who was this journalist and who lived his days and his life like that. So it's part of my life. It's the substantial part of my life. The way I passed my days then, the way I lived them, the way I thought, the people I met, everything I did, that is my life. That goes into the. It's just like the period before that, that of childhood, that of teenage. It's a different experience of life, and it does go into the fiction. It does go into the fiction, not necessarily in a straightforward way, but in some form or another, it does find its way there.
But you're no longer a journalist. You're now concentrating solely on fiction, or are you doing both still?
Yeah, solely on fiction.
And when did you make the decision to start writing short stories?
I wrote short stories for a while, but I think I wasn't ready for a long time, and I could write. I was trying, testing myself, writing a story here or there, but then there was, I think, this time like 5 years ago, 6 years ago, and I knew that I must leave it now. I must turn and I must sit down and write. And yeah, it's a process that I cannot really, because I'm not even sure. When you ask me that question, I turn back to think, and I would like there to be a linear answer. I would like myself to know. But the truth is, I don't know. The truth is, if I ask myself, why did I do it when I did it and why not before? The answer, I simply don't have the answer to that question. So all I can say is I started writing one story after another. There was also the sense of the wasting of time, that whatever I do now, if I don't write fiction, which I really want to write, everything else is wasting time. It's wasting time, wasting life, and there was no turning away from it then. Many things go into it. Many things go into the turning we make. And in that moment, we might be aware of more. But now that I'm so far away from it, I can maybe speak of one or two. And I don't think that is the true answer. I wouldn't even know myself.
What was the first story that you wrote?
For this collection, the first story that goes into it, I think, was Flowers from a Dog.
And one day you just started getting up maybe earlier? Like, I'm curious just to know about the practical side of it. Like, you
No, I tried to start a novel, which was a novella, and I didn't finish it. It was, I think I wanted to start a novel, and I left it midway, very early, like around 20, 30 pages. Somehow I just didn't feel like going on. Something told me it was not right, or I was not. The story was right. It felt right to me. It was true. It was real. It was not. I was not bullshitting my way around. But then I wrote another story, and which doesn't go into this collection. But that was a real story. That story. After that story, I wrote this one. It was. I can't truly. I can't answer like why. Because if I had the answer to that question, I would tell myself, why didn't you do it 5 years ago? Why did you waste the time? But I think there were too many. There was a squeezing. It was almost that life squeezed me from various places. And I knew that it was time, amid that squeeze, amid that tightness, that it was time to either sit down, focus, or the I would be caught so tight in a grasp that I wouldn't be able to function.
in the grasp of like your day job.
Circumstances, various kinds of circumstances gathered, I guess. And I had the feeling that if I don't dig this way now, it will be late. There is a Kafka story, the burrow, in which the animal, the rodent, he has to solidify the walls of the burrow in which it lives, and the burrowing, the hardening of the walls, mud walls, so that they don't fall off. Every time it goes back and runs into the wall and hits the wall with its forehead, thereby solidifying the walls. So, in a way, it was something, whether it was solidifying a wall or finding one's way out, it had to be done in desperation. So, if I reflect on it calmly, I'm not in the state. I can't. Now it's a very calm state. Then it was not a calm state. It was a state of desperation out of which I started writing.
That squares. I feel like I've talked to a lot of writers who got started when they felt like they had no other choice. Or I guess they had
Yeah,
another choice, but it was kind of now or never. And I think too what you're saying about how it's such a wide range of circumstances that contribute to the writing of a book. And I think a big part of it, at least for me, is reading. I think I have to do enough reading to be able to write, to have amassed enough like input in order for there to be output. I'm curious to know what kinds of books you were reading and what you were inspired by. It sounds like you were reading Kafka.
yeah, Kafka, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Toni Morrison. Lots of. I was reading. I was reading as much as I could. Sometimes I was not finishing books, but I was reading. I was reading all kinds of. I think fiction primarily. I was reading fiction and reading carefully, reading very thoughtfully, reading slowly, reading with a sense of purpose for a long time. Because in a way, I was preparing myself for writing for a very long time.
You knew that you were going to write a book eventually, or at least you hoped.
Yeah, there was no option. I was not going to write it. I didn't have the. If I wrote it, I would hold together. If I didn't write it, I wouldn't hold together. So it was either writing the book or even till I grew very old to fantasize that I am going to write it. Those were the only two ways of keeping going.
So you have said in a previous interview that I read that you don't know anything about the story that you're about to write when you sit down to write it. And you say that's a necessity for you to kind of maybe you go in with like an image or
Yeah,
some
image.
sort of vague notion of what world you're in or who you're following, but it's pretty much the case that you are making it up as you go, correct?
Yeah, pretty much making up. But But it's not entirely true that I have no sense of it. I have a sense of it. It's like a haze. It's like somewhere far away I'm chasing something, but it's not a. I don't. It's like a negative image. I don't want to develop it. It's caught up in mist. It's dark. It's twilight. It's all those kinds of misty images that I want to follow, but never have a structure. If I think a story through, I've done this, and that's how I realized it. If I think a story through, its pleasure for me is over. It has kind of culminated. It has given me what it has to give me.
It's more stimulating when you have to discover it.
Yeah, when I don't know what I. But that's also the kind of person I am, really. It's not just for stories. It's the kind of person I am that I would not want to book return tickets.
What do you mean?
I just want to be. I'll just like to be freer.
It also feels kind of journalistic to me to want to like follow the story and see where it leads rather than maybe have the whole thing like set out for you.
Maybe, yeah, maybe. But also, I think it's the kind of person I am. That's why it's a necessity, because I don't want to write what I already know. It just doesn't. It's just work, and I'm not the best guy for work.
Yeah, there's no play in it if you've got it all.
Yeah, there's no play in it. I would rather like play along. I'd rather have some little bit of fun. But that doesn't mean I don't have a sense. I don't have a sense uh, of what I am dealing with. It is just that I don't know what it is. But I have a sense of. I have a mood. There is a sense of the mood. There is a sense of the silence. There's a sense of several things, but a very vague sense.
When you consider the collection in retrospect, is there any kind of common denominator from story to story in terms of how you felt compelled to write them? Like, like was it a question at the heart of the story that was kind of drawing you into the mist, or was it a character, or was it different across the collection?
Different, I would say. Different across the collection. And the first stories were different. The latter were different because by the time I arrived to writing, let's say, the 10th story, I had the 9 stories behind me. It didn't mean that I was any better. I was in some ways better at it. But when I did the first story, it was the feeling that, okay, I've done it. Or is this a story? But I think one of the common denominators of all the stories was a sense of having failed at it. The sense of once the story was over, after a brief sense of this is over, there was the sense of it's not right. The the sense of having failed the story in some ways. But at the same time, knowing that I've done work at it, I've written, I've tried hard, I've not slacked off.
So even when the stories were done and you had taken them as far as you could take them, the feeling tended to be one of like, oh, I failed. I didn't get to where I wanted to go.
Failed, yeah. It was not where, it was just that, like, it was strange. It was a sense of failure after each one almost. But except, like, there were even the stories where at the end I felt I had gone somewhere. And even after them, I think there was the sense of having failed. And but it was fine because I think that's what I would be walking around and I would tell myself, what can I do? I did my best. If that's what has to happen, let me try again and let me repeat the failure. What can I do?
Well, it's interesting to me to hear you say this because I feel like these stories are very accomplished. Like they feel like there's a lot of
Thank you.
structural integrity. The line by line writing is beautiful. And it just felt like I was in the hands of a writer who was in command. So you fooled me for whatever it's worth.
I fool me.
Good.
But the only person to fool here is me, I think. And yeah, no, it's hard, to be honest. I think it is hard because I see this story, I see it for its moments of for its moments of beauty, for its moments of truth, but also with its flaws. It's inescapable. I look at it and I see the flaws, and that's fine. I think I have learned to accept it. I've learned to accept that that's what it is, and it's good. It's in a way good because what is left, the mess that is left in my hands, in a way propels me to do the next thing.
Well, it brings to mind that idea that a work of art is never finished, it's only abandoned. At some point, you
Yeah,
stop typing or you put the pen down. You've done as much as you can do, and it I think there's kind of a nice humility in this idea that we always fail as artists. Like, you're never gonna
yeah,
do the ultimate, in terms of creation. There's always gonna be the mistakes in there that, of course, I think the writer tends to be aware of to a far greater degree than the reader. Like, I certainly wasn't reading this collection and noticing a bunch of errors in it or anything like that. But as the writer, you know it most intimately, and you're probably harder on yourself than most readers would be.
yeah. I guess that's partly the case, but it's also good. I think it's not a bad thing because it's also I'm aware of where I wanted to go. So it's I'm aware of when I finish the story. I could almost see the possibility of where it could go, but I couldn't go there, and which is why there was this sense of not having touched something that I could see, almost see within my sight, but did not have the ability to touch.
But maybe that same like disparity between the vision that you had and your ability to reach it is precisely why you were compelled to write it and could sustain the energy necessary to complete the story. Like, that's
Yeah,
kind of the fun, is to the fact that you're chasing something that's always going to be a little bit out of reach. It seems like that's
yeah.
what propels you.
Yeah, I would look at these, for example, some of the stories, and I would say that's a bad story. That's like, okay, let me write a better one, only to turn back to see how did I manage to write even that one? Because I would sit at a new story and it wasn't easy to write. And then I would have to turn back to the last one and actually read it. And I was like, okay, that's not that bad because I'm able to not write anything new. But I think that is the process. It's a painful process. There are no formulas. You simply have to dig your way through using your hands, your claws. You have to just make way for yourself. And and yeah, that's how it is, I guess. There were a couple of stories in this collection when I felt that now I understood what a short story is at the end of them. And I exactly remember I thought now I understand what a short story is, and now I can write it every time I like to write it because now I have understood what a short story is. And a week later, thankfully, I was purged of my own idea of what a short story is. And I had no idea what it was again, except that there was an image, there was a person, there was an animal, there was a mood that I was following, that I was digging into, that I was carrying.
What were some of the biggest challenges? I mean, you talk about how difficult it is. It's just, I mean, I think of my own work. It's like just trying to put the words in the right order, trying to see the story more clearly. Were there particular aspects of the process that you found most difficult?
The revising, I didn't know it had to be revised so many times. I thought I was going to write a first draft so good that I wouldn't have to do a second time. Then I thought, let me clean up this mess a little bit and then it's done. And I had absolutely no idea that like around 100 revisions would go into each story
But it
that I would
shows
have
up
to. I
it
think,
shows up on the page. I feel like like there's a real economy of language and just the feeling that the work has been done when I read these stories. So it doesn't surprise me to hear that you took it through so many paces.
yeah, revision again and again. And yeah, that was hard, but that was also fun. But it's a mix of the difficulty and the fun. So, yeah.
Were you working with an editor on the revisions, or was this something you were doing on your own?
No, by the time I think I went to the editors, I had done many revisions, but then I went to the Cornell MFA program and I worked at revisions there. And it was also a process of this book growing with me because it took me 5 years to write. I revised the earlier stories many times, slowly understanding them, slowly trying to, in the process, trying to take away all attention from myself as the writer, slowly realizing that this is not about me. This is about the story. And I think it was a wonderful process. It was a it was difficult. It was painful. It is painful now when I'm thinking of writing something. It is difficult. But what would life be without it? I cannot imagine.
It gives you something too. It takes away, your energy and maybe your sanity at times, but at the end of the process, I feel like you've usually gained something. You've gained more than you've lost.
It gives also a sense of center. It is like probably a false sense of center, but it gives you something at the center.
It's nice to be in the
And
midst of a project when you're working and you're working well and you get up every day and you have that to do and you have that place to go imaginatively.
yeah, it's like sometimes I wake up in the morning and I tell myself, let me keep lying down on this couch and imagine. I know I'm just lying to myself. I just want to sleep some more. But what beautiful 10 minutes when I'm lying to myself saying, let me imagine this novel that I want to imagine in the darkness. And but what pleasure. What pleasure to do that. But also pain. I think it's a mix of the pleasure and pain. And it's fun. It's like at the end of the day, it's, I guess, fun.
It's a certain kind of fun.
Also, it is fun for me. I can't imagine. Um, it's very hard for me to imagine a meaningful life without it for myself.
So I'm curious to know your thoughts on the collection in the aggregate. This is something that I always love talking with writers about when they've published a short story collection. And it has to do with considering the collection as a whole and also considering the collection in sequence. Like the specificity of the sequence of the stories
Mhm.
is interesting to me because those are deliberate choices. And I think it's often the case, maybe not always, but often the case that writers who publish collections come to realize what the collection is about towards the end of the process. Maybe even after publication, as they start to read, like reviews and hear from readers, you begin to realize maybe the totality of the project, and maybe the deeper themes of it, and how the different stories are in conversation with one another. Do you have a clear sense of your book in that respect?
No, I don't think so. And I don't even want to have it. I know that it's part of a world. It is a world that as I said, is obscure, vague for me as the writer. I don't want to understand it because I don't think my second book, if I write, is another world. It's the same world. I want to keep this world obscure for myself to some degree. I don't want to understand it. I would rather want to make a next visit there. Probably probe deeper, go farther, meet other people, see what is happening, what does it mean, what is it like to be here. But I don't think I want to have it. Is not that I don't have an understanding of it. It is I have an understanding of it at the back of my head. I just don't want to bring it to the front of my head.
Well, I'm sorry I asked.
I don't. No, no, no. I ask myself, and I don't. I just don't do it. I think because there is this trap of knowing one's work and then writing a sentence and analyzing it, of creating a character and wondering what you've created. I just would like to avoid it. I just want to go almost with the eyes half closed, like see enough uh, to make my way, but not enough to see the whole stretch or to understand it. I do understand it in ways of what I was trying to do when I was writing it, what I was trying to do, and those are the clarities I have. But to be honest, really, I don't think I have the clarities. I It took me these all these pages to say something, and I'm not sure what I have said at the end of it.
Have you been reading reviews and have you been hearing from readers? Have they been telling you what you did?
Yeah, I saw some of the reviews, and I told myself it's time to stop reading reviews because they're giving me an idea of my own book. I don't want to have an idea of my own book. I just want to have my book. I just want to have this world in which I go. And because I think you hear this thing a few times of what this book is about, and you begin to think, or I begin to think that that's what it's about. It is for me a vague and obscure process, and I want to keep it vague and obscure so that I can go again into this country uh, and live there some more time.
And when you say this country, you mean
The world of the
the
fiction
world of the fiction. And it is set, this collection, in Kashmir.
in Kashmir.
Do you plan on setting future fiction in Kashmir, or do you have ideas that take you out of that country,
No, Kashmir. I think
Kashmir?
it's a. I think it's like it's big. It's very big. It might like the place, the people, the lanes. It's I think big enough for me for now, as I can see. I think this with this collection, I've almost just made acquaintance of people. I would like to see more of these people. I'd like to see them because I think people's troubles, people's lives are pretty much the same in various different ways. You take one person, you take another person, it all comes down to the same things. There are particular differences, there is class, there are all of that, but one can explore the same questions, I guess, everywhere.
I mean, I was right there. I've never been to Kashmir. I'm here in Los Angeles. I was reading this book and felt like I was right there. And as I was telling you before,
I'm glad you felt that.
yeah, and as I was telling you before we got started, having not been to that part of the world, I was, of course, Googling, and it is just breathtakingly gorgeous. So it's a
Yeah,
beautiful
it's
setting
it's
into which to
beautiful.
write.
Yeah, it's winter right now and it's cold, but it's also so beautiful. Every day I go out, I look, the trees have shed the leaves and everything has gone into itself. There is this repose, everything has retreated into people are walking the streets. It's just beautiful. It's stunning in so many ordinary ways. It doesn't. I'm not speaking about the mountains, the hills, the snow. I mean, just the street, just the sense on the street, just the feeling, just that air, just that morning, the afternoon, the evening.
So when you talk about wanting to spend more time with these people, like I've got like this country. So you are talking about the world of your fiction, which is at least for the time being going to be set in Kashmir. When you say these people, you know, I I would say like, okay, so the characters in your stories feel like ordinary people who live in Kashmir. You're writing about ordinary lives and the
Yeah.
dramas of those lives. Do you plan on writing about some of these characters in future fiction, or do you mean to say that you want to explore like more lives in that world?
Yeah, I think just people like simple people, ordinary people who are ordinary. They're the most extraordinary to themselves. Like, 100 prime ministers can die, but they would want themselves to live. There is nobody more important than I am to myself. Like an empire can fall and crumble. I don't care. I should live. And so when we say ordinary people, they are the center of their own world. Nobody's life is as complicated as theirs to them. And that when I want to say, but there are also people uh, who live in this obscure haze of crowd. There is this crowd, they're part of the crowd, and yet every one of them has a difficult life. And they think, they wonder, they ruminate, they deal with loss and the questions of how to live, what is life, how to relate to another person. All those questions are right there.
How do you build your characters? I know a lot of writers who work from real life in a fairly direct way. They might amalgamate, different people that they know or characteristics from people that they know and then assemble a character that way. Other times it'll be pretty close to the actual. Do you find yourself in your day-to-day life like carefully observing people as you're walking around or you're on a bus or a train or something, or are you somebody who's lifting like different characteristics and pieces of people and then building characters that way?
Yeah. Lots of the time, it's just sentences. It is a sentence I have, I write a sentence, and then I follow, and then this person who is says something. Often they say something, and slowly I want them to say what they want to say. Dialogue, speech. I want them to follow a thought, and it's rarely it is modeled upon other people. They're not character sketches of other people. They are more people who come slowly together through sentences, through language, through dialogue, through internal monologue, but they are informed by my observations of people. Because that also slips in. It's more unconscious in that sense. That somebody says something else, and immediately we have a kind of a person. This is the kind of person who says that. And maybe this is the kind of person who says that at one place and something else at another place. And thereby you have the slow coming together of a character.
It's a very imaginative process.
Yeah, and that's why it's also hard for me. Characters are hard for me, mm, because I also want to get them right.
So, just to give listeners some idea of the characters that you're portraying in this collection, there is a story. I guess that I guess the best place to begin is with the story from which the collection takes its title. It's a pretty harrowing story, and it is called Crows, and it's about a young boy who experiences corporal punishment by a teacher who has very strict and harsh standards of performance in the classroom. And he says at one point, this teacher does, "Do you know what is waiting out there? The world with its mouth open." It's a brutal story and heartbreaking. And I'm just curious to know about its origins and like whether or not you knew when you wrote that line if you had your title like immediately or did it
No,
come later?
no. Much later, at the end of the collection, when I was looking through that, what rings true for this collection, and I think not in the moment, but I knew that that was a sentence that was central. When the man spoke it, when he said, "Do you know what is waiting out there for you? The world with its mouth open." And that was I knew that was a sentence that was real to this man, real to their vision of the world, for the boy's mother as well, because she's also afraid of this world. She tells the teacher that please take him, make him a pupil of yours, otherwise the world will trample him under its feet. For the mother also, the world is a very scary place. If you don't join it, if you're not in the first rung, if you're not in the bus of this world, you will be run down under its tires. It is a vision that the boy's mother has. She's afraid of this. If you don't make it, you'll be trampled under the feet. And the teacher also, in some ways, shares it. He is also, um, in a way, afraid of this world that if you're not prepared, if you're not sharp enough, if you don't have, it's going to gobble you down. So I think the moment I said it and it resonated with the mother said this, the guy says this, and I understood that that was what the story was about, this one. But I didn't know the title then.
I want to ask you about the story The House.
Hmm.
which begins with a work crew and a member of that work crew digging up the bones of a human hand. And I should say, and this is probably indicative of what I'm about to say, that there is a haunted feeling to these stories. These are not horror stories or like supernatural or anything like that, but there's definitely this kind of pervasive sense of loss and grief and a kind of often a kind of ominousness that you feel in a very subtle way that for me was very effective. I think too of the opening story where there's nothing like not the house, but I'm blanking on the name of the opening story, but
The bridge.
the bridge, yeah, where I didn't necessarily have evidence on the page that there was something really dark at work, but I had a very palpable sense of it as a reader, kind of a sense of like growing dread. So that's to your credit as a writer for creating that effect like so beautifully and so subtly. But when it comes to the house, you have said that the writing of it comes out of the desire to have a house in a graveyard. Uh,
Hmm.
like to have a house, I think, amid or like in a place where there has been a lot of like turmoil and conflict and destruction. Is that correct?
Yeah, where there is. It's not the past. It is not even. It's not a graveyard of the past. It's a present. It's a future, and it is that violence that one wants to have a house in the midst of all of it.
And you begin that story with a like what? I'm imagining you saw the bones of the hand. Like that was the image that drew you into that one.
I'll have to think. I don't know. I think I had this. Why did I write it? I really don't remember, to be honest. But I remember that when I when the sentence came that Manzoor, the new laborer, screamed God. That was the more interesting sentence. That was the more interesting when he screams God. He does not scream for God or anything. He just screams God, and comes running through the trenches. And yeah, I think that was the image of him finding something there. I wasn't sure what. It was crystallizing for a long time because, as I said in that interview, I was thinking of having a place. I was thinking of, but at the same time, and that's when you say it is a haunted book. It is also haunted because it is set in a place where you think of one thing, and around that thing, other things rise. These phantoms, these ghosts, these absences, things you don't want to think about. And you don't want to think about them, thereby they become more present. So one is in a territory, when I even called it a country of this fiction, one is in a territory where the present and the absent and the forgotten and the remembered all exist simultaneously.
I think that's what this collection speaks to, maybe most deeply. Like you just said it. And I'm also curious to ask you about the dedication page
Hmm.
because I thought, yeah, I have a galley of the book. And so I was opening it and I read the dedication page and it just says for. So
Yeah.
like FOR and then there's nothing else. And I thought like, oh, okay, well this is a galley. He's going to add a dedication, subsequently when the book is officially published, but that's not the case, right? It's just for.
Yeah. It is just for.
Why?
I think I forgot to add it in the first edition as well.
This is a little bit enigmatic, right? It's intentional,
It is intentional. I just, yeah,
but you can't give any
yeah.
any further insight. It's like it's about maybe it's speaking to the absences, like this theme of absence in the collection, and so the person or the people to whom the book would be dedicated might be part of that absence. Am I barking up the right tree or
Yeah, it may be, maybe, but the truth is, I just didn't have anything to. I knew I wanted to write the for, but at the same time, there was no one and everyone for it. And and yeah, there were these. I wanted it to be empty. I just, yeah, I wanted the fall to be there, but nothing there at the same time. And I really don't know why.
I like it.
I would be making up an answer if I said.
I like it as a choice. I've never seen it before. So you stand alone as a writer who has only used the word for in their dedication, as far as I know, and it fits the collection.
Yeah, I thought it would be foolish at first, but I thought, what can I do? That's what is it is. It is that's how it wants to be, and I let it be.
So I want to ask you about some of the more practical aspects of publication. When you got close to completing this collection and it came time to try to find a publisher, try to find, I would imagine, finding literary representation, or I don't know if that was part of the equation, but can you talk a little bit about how you did it?
Yeah, it was hard. It was just like, entering this new terrain about which I knew nothing. And it was writing to people, writing to agents, and lots of them saying no, not responding for a long time. But Stuart was the person who said yes.
Who
And
who
from the
is who
moment
is
he said
Stewart?
yes, Stuart Bernstein,
Okay.
who's my agent, he immediately said yes when he read it. And he's been amazing ever since. He believes in these stories more than I did at that point. I believed in them as the writer of them. I did not believe in the output. I believed that I had done my best. I believed that there was something true about them, but he believed that they were good. So that complemented, I guess, because I wasn't so sure about that.
You found a champion.
And yeah, he was wonderful and he's been wonderful. And then I think usual, I guess it's hard. It is just you enter a new space. And for most of the people who are writing their first book, it is a new terrain. You don't know how to do it. You've never done it. And it's hard. But I think eventually it happens. And it's a good thing that it's hard, because by the time uh, the book actually comes out, you're so bruised that it doesn't matter. You moved beyond it.
Yeah, that's familiar to me. Like by the time by
Yeah,
the
it's
time
like by the time it comes, if it comes at first, one would be giddy with joy. But by the time it comes, you've already moved past it.
yeah, I think just as like a function of time, because there's usually a pretty long lag between acquisition
Yeah,
and publication, but also oftentimes
of rejections.
that's what I was going to say. You've amassed like so many slings and arrows at that point, and the book's been rejected, and you've heard all these different things about it. I
And it doesn't even hurt after a while, I think. The first rejections hurt so much. It feels so personal. And then rejection after rejection, you keep eating like your food. You get a rejection in the middle of a sandwich and you just take the next bite and you say, I'll check what they've said later. Because I know what they could have said. It's not that they're going to say something new.
and it's just one opinion.
Which together becomes many opinions over time, many people rejecting it. But I think it's good. I really think it's good. I think it's good that by the time so many rejections come, you also become distant from your own work and you allow it to be on its own. It's not you, it is itself. And you're somewhere else doing something else.
And you landed with Tin House, which is a great press.
Yeah.
Was it a
Yeah.
long
Tin House is amazing.
was it a long process getting there? Like going through like
No, not very long. Not very long. And they were amazing. Macy was amazing. All of them, Macy, Becky, everybody. And yeah, I'm really glad they took that book, because I think they allowed this book for what it was from the moment they met me. And so it was great. I didn't know then that you want somebody who loves you the way you are. But I think over time, working with them, when I saw their edits, they didn't change. They didn't want me to change anything except the grammars, the dangling participles, and all of that. But other than that, nothing. They did not ask me to explain what was vague in the stories. They did not tell me that the American reader won't get it. They were very clear on that, that some of the things the American reader won't get because we don't get, and we understand that it's not for them to get everything.
Right.
And which I like because I have read so many novels which are from Russia, France, Germany. I don't get all of them. And yet I read them because I understand it's not all for me. Some of it, some of the details, realities in a Saramago novel are for those who are from Portugal, some for those who are from the immediate vicinity in Europe. By the time it arrives to me, something is lost in that cultural distance, in that cultural. But it is true in itself. I wouldn't want to write a book that wants to explain something to somebody who's very far away. They can take from it what is there to be taken away, because it's not that it's not written to them, but not primarily. It's not an explainer. It's not an explainer.
Yeah, and I think that's part of the pleasure of reading books outside of one's cultural context is to you get to travel a bit. That was kind of the joy for me in reading your collection was getting to visit this place that I'd never been to before, but now I feel like I kind of have.
Thank you. That's great. And I agree with you. That's the kind of fun. It's not like you eat a McDonald's there and you want a McDonald's here. That's boring.
Yeah.
But that
No
is
more
the
McDonald's, please.
but that is the sorry fate of the world. That no matter where you go now, you eat the same KFC. Everything looks the same.
Yeah, that's sad to me.
So in that way, Tin House was amazing, and they were like amazing from the beginning to now. They have been wonderful. I have no complaints, and I'm grateful.
It's interesting to be here now, like celebrating your debut story collection and its publication after all of these years kind of nursing this dream, right? You said you wanted to write fiction for a long time. And then you
For a
finally kind
long
of got
time.
to a point where it was now or never. You felt that pressure within yourself to make the leap. Otherwise, you feared that it might not ever happen. And,
Yeah,
you know, you did it. You wrote a book and
yeah.
it's being
That's what I
published.
tell myself.
Yeah, it's being published and it's being published well and it's something to be proud of. And I'm curious to know if you do feel proud or how do you feel like now that you're on the other side of it, like you did the thing. How does it feel to you? What's the experience like, and does it measure up to how you might have imagined it being prior to getting to this place?
Yeah, it is never like that. It is never like the our imagine. It's never like our fantasy. But it is good. I think I am aware of the fact that, like, when you like ask me the question why and how did I write it, I am actually thinking of how did I write it? How did I go so many times to it for all these years and sit down and do it? Because knowing myself, I also know the kind of person I am. I'm not the best guy to sit hunched over a desk and do it. So the desperation must have been pretty terrible for me to be able to do it, for me to have done it. So I'm glad about that, that I haven't, because I wanted to do it. And I'm glad I did it. So there is there. But yeah, what I really feel is the question that can I now do it again? Can I write something more? Can I do it? So that is where I am personally, is not looking at the past. This book in a way is done for me. It's behind me. I have very little emotional connection with it. For me, it's something that's outside of me. It is an object. It is an object that is in this shape. It's a book in my hand. It's an object. It is not inside me now. And so therefore there is very little what is inside me now is something new, something that I can't see the shape of yet. And that again I ask myself, can I do it? Do I have the courage? Do I have the patience? Do I have all of it to sit down and etch it out, whatever it is, to go there? But with this one, it's not really, it's not inside me. Like I said, it's this book. I know it's a knowledge. It is the knowledge of having written this book, but it doesn't have a connection with me really.
That's interesting and also familiar because for such a long time, it did have such a connection to you, and it was so profound. It's a
Such a strong connection.
and then you externalize it, and you go through this process, and it's outside of you, and it's done. And I kind of feel the same way about my books. Like, I haven't read or looked at my books in years, because
I can't read it.
no, it's like, no, I did it. I did the work. You sort of, you're the cook in the kitchen. You don't want to eat the food,
Yeah, you don't want. Also, you've tasted it so many times along the cooking that when you sit down to eat it with everybody, you can't taste anything
Right.
because you tasted it without salt, with spice, you tasted it every possible way. So by the time it's over, you are the stranger to it.
It's not yours anymore.
Yeah, and for good. I think again, it's for the good. I wouldn't want to be like hold this in my hand and say, "This is my book. This is my book."
Right.
I want to be that person.
Yeah.
I am so glad that it is like this, that this is a book that's out there. It is just one more book in this shelf. And and what is more intimate, what is more real is the imagination, is the thought in my mind, is the sense of possibility that stirs inside me of whatever it is that I feel there. That's more real.
So I always close by talking with writers about what they're working on next. It sounds like you're in the beginning stages. Do you know if you're going to write a novel? Are you working on more short stories? Is it unclear?
It's pretty unclear. I think I would want to write a novel, but I'm not. I don't want to also. I want to give it time to see if it comes together, if it is real as a novel, because I don't know if the form. I like short stories. They came to me. They were good. To me, I felt that now I can say that in the moment. That's what I tell myself. I tell myself that before I give up on the idea of a novel, that I can do it. I must do it for the next 4 years, just like I did these short stories that I all along thought are not good enough, and I'm making a mess at them every time I'm sitting at them. So a novel, perhaps, but I guess it's too early to tell. I guess um, there is something. There is something I'm making my way through into. I can see, I can feel, but yeah, but I'm not sure.
So when I read really well realized fiction, I will often describe it as having like a kind of urgency to it. And there is this sense that the author really had something to say. It was like desperately important to them to say it. And if the writer doesn't have that, I will sometimes feel the opposite. I'll see that on the page too, where I'm just like, this person's just kind of telling me a story, but it's not really coming from their heart and their soul in the way that I love books to be written. And I struggle with this as a writer myself. It's like getting myself to a place where I feel that urgency and maybe even that desperation, as we've been talking about with your collection. Do you think about that? Like, wow, like if I'm going to do another book project, do I somehow have to be in contact with that feeling of desperation again, or has it never left you? Like, do you feel like you can maintain
No,
it?
I think I'm desperate. I think I'm pretty desperate. I'm pretty desperate. I'm a pretty desperate person. I am like filling. I'm filling the thing. I am. So I am aware. I'm aware that is the second book real? I want it to be real. And I will, I think, know while writing it that if it is real. If it is not real, I don't want to write it. I don't want to. Why bother? Why bother myself and somebody else? Why write trash? Why waste somebody else's time? It can be a bad book, that's fine, as long as it's real, as long as the striving is real, as long as it is done out of its own necessity, as long as it is not done because I wrote one book, so I must write another because that is what the career of a writer is. That would be pretty cheap. That would be pretty boring. There are other fun things to do and have. If I think I realize there is not much in it for me, I'll probably go do something else. I'll have fun. I'll just walk about the streets, enjoy.
When you say you're desperate, you mean you have a real drive to tell stories. You feel like there are stories within you that you need to externalize.
No, it just means that I have a crisis, that I somehow feel I can delay if I write.
And if you don't write, then the crisis is going to realize itself in you.
Yeah, then I'll be like a crazy guy running around in many ways.
Yeah, I think that that's often the case with writers. It's like a life, it's a way of being alive, and it kind of supports just the very process of existing for people. In the absence of it, I think most writers feel like they would struggle.
Yeah, it will be pretty hard. In a way, I will have to reorient myself. I'll have to remake myself. I'll have to remake my structure. But if it is gone by itself, then I guess that's what it will be. But I wouldn't want to just, if the desperation is not there, if the necessity is not there, then why bother? Then why there are like, why make somebody else read a book for 10 hours? 10 hours is an important time in somebody's life. They should do something else.
So with this next project, are there any inklings, like any hints you can give as to like what direction you're headed in creatively? Is there a character or a theme or something that you're writing towards that you can actually feel and describe right now?
No, no, it's like, I'll feel very jittery. I'll feel I'll jinx it. Because it's so, I'm so tentative about it myself that the moment I utter it, it's over. It must not be uttered because, it's like this. It'll be like I said earlier, the negative of the film camera. It'll be like exposing it to light.
I've heard some variation of what you just said in response to the question that I asked, because I ask it at the end of all of these conversations. And a lot of writers are very loath to talk about their next work, but I've never heard somebody describe it quite so poetically as like this, film negative exposed to light. That's a beautiful way of putting it. And I am so grateful to you for taking the time to talk with me about your collection. I'm really glad that we got to feature The World with Its Mouth Open in the book club this month. And I congratulate you. It's a fine debut, and I really look forward to whatever comes next, whatever mysterious project it is that you're working on. When it finally comes to fruition, we'll be excited to read it. So congratulations and thanks again.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me here, and thank you for keeping this book in the book club. I really appreciate it, and it was wonderful speaking to you.
Okay, folks, there we have it. That was my conversation with Zahid Rafiq. His debut story collection is called The World with Its Mouth Open. It is available from Tin House. It was the official December 2024 pick of the Otherppl Book Club. That is my book club. It's called The World with Its Mouth Open. You should read it. It's a great debut story collection. Go get your copy wherever you get your books. Don't forget to subscribe to this show wherever you listen. Hit the subscribe button. Follow me on social media, Bluesky and Instagram. Sign up for my newsletter over at Substack, and you can also join the Otherppl Patreon community. Help keep this show rolling into the future. Support the work that I do so that I can keep doing it. Patreon.com/otherpplpod. If you want to join my book club, get a new book delivered to your door every 30 days, just go to otherppl.com. I interview book club authors on this show. So it's nice. You read and then you listen, or you listen and then you read. It's your choice. If you have 2 minutes and you want to do me a quick favor, please give this show a rating wherever you listen. You can also write a little review sometimes if that's an option. That helps. It helps the show in the algorithm. It helps it find new listeners. If you want to get an Otherppl t-shirt, you can do that at otherppl.com. And if you want to read my latest book, it is a novel. It's called Be Brief and Tell Them Everything. Available in trade paperback, ebook, and audiobook editions. I narrate the audiobook. So if that sounds good, go get it, read it, or have me read it to you. It is a novel, and it is called Be Brief and Tell Them Everything. Okay, coming up on Thursday, I will be back with my friend and co-host, Mira Gonzalez, for another episode of Brad and Mira for the Culture, where we talk about pop culture. I don't know very much about it. Mira knows a lot about it, and that's sort of the show, if that makes sense. So check it out, coming up on Thursday, Brad and Mira for the Culture.